So today, we're going to dive into a pretty different kind of cybersecurity threat. Seriously, this isn't about just one bug. Think of it more like a detective story, where we're piecing together a whole new class of vulnerability from a trail of clues that at first glance just looked like, well, junk. Unrelated, dismissed bug reports. Let's follow the evidence. Our story kicks off with a security researcher. We'll call him David. And he's just staring at his screen, at a bug tracker that is just a sea of red alerts. But he's got this gut feeling, you know? The real danger isn't in all the emergencies everyone is running around trying to put out. No, it's hidden somewhere else, right there in plain sight. And this slide just lays out the central mystery perfectly. On one side, you have the firefight, all the critical active threats that security teams are scrambling to fix. But look at the other side. That's the graveyard, a list of bugs dismissed as works as intended, obsolete, or can't reproduce. And David's hunch? The key to the whole earthquake was buried right there, in that graveyard. Okay, so to solve this whole mystery, he first had to figure out the trigger. And the very first clue came from an exploit that seemed, well, it seemed almost insultingly simple. The mechanism behind it is a classic security flaw. It's called the confused deputy. It's like tricking a security guard into using their master key to open the main vault when they think they're just opening a supply closet. But here's the modern twist. The deputy isn't a person. It's an AI. And with AI coding assistants everywhere now, this old trick has found a dangerously new life. The exploit itself is just surprisingly straightforward. An attacker asks an AI agent to analyze a file, right? But instead of a real trace file, they just point it to the calculator program, calc.exe. Now, the system's security check is kind of lazy. It just asks, hey, does this file exist? It never stops to ask, wait, is this the right kind of file? So since calc.exe does exist, the system just says, okay, great, and runs it. And bang! Just like that, you've got remote code execution. A little calculator pops up on the screen. But look, opening a calculator isn't the real damage here. This is just the trigger. It's the gunshot that starts the avalanche. So let's head back to that graveyard and see how this all connects. Remember those dismissed bugs, the cold cases? When you looked at each one by itself, they all looked like, well, like nothing. Security teams would look at them, shrug, and just move on. And here's why they were ignored. One bug? It just lets you write a harmless string. So, works as intended, they said. Another one caused a browser crash, but it was a safe crash, didn't seem exploitable, and another was a prompt injection that seemed to do absolutely nothing. Each bug was just a snapshot in time, a single contained event that on its own didn't look like a threat at all. But that right there was the mistake. They were only looking at snapshots. The big breakthrough came when they stopped looking at individual moments and started looking at the connections between them across time. And this is the question that changes absolutely everything. What if that harmless bug, the one that caused a safe crash, wasn't a failure at all? What if it was actually the successful first step in a much bigger plan, just setting the stage for what was to come? This leads us to this whole new class of vulnerability called a Temporal Boundary Integrity Failure. The core flaw is this. When a system crashes and reboots or just wakes up from sleep, it often blindly trusts the state it was in right before it went down. It just assumes the past was safe. And that trust, that's the vulnerability. It lets attackers stack seemingly harmless actions across time to build something really malicious. Okay, so here's how the attack actually plays out. Phase 1, the setup. An attacker uses one of those harmless graveyard bugs to write a tiny, benign piece of data into memory. Then, the system crashes or reboots. Phase 2, the resume. The system comes back online, sees that little piece of data from before, and trusts it completely. Now, Phase 3, the execution. The attacker pulls that simple Playwright trigger, but in this pre-poisoned environment. And the result is it's just catastrophic. Without that tiny piece of data from Phase 1, the trigger just pops open a calculator. No big deal. But with that data already waiting in memory from before the reboot, the exact same trigger mounts the host's entire file system. We're talking full system compromise. It's the difference between a firecracker and a bomb. This analogy from the actual researcher's report it sums it up perfectly. Security systems will stop you from throwing a brick through a window if you try to do it all at once. But what they don't check is if you got authorization for the brick on Monday, got authorization for the window on Tuesday, and then came back on Wednesday after a system reboot to put the two together. So you have to be asking, How could a flaw this fundamental be missed for so long? Well, the rabbit hole goes even deeper. It turns out the vulnerability wasn't just a technical blind spot in the code, it was a procedural blind spot in the very system that's supposed to find these flaws. The automated bug triage systems, the ones using AI to sort through reports, were actually part of the problem. They were creating this massive flood of low-quality alerts and false positives. All this noise, as you can see in these internal reports, was just overwhelming the human security teams. The real clues, the little pieces of this temporal attack, were getting buried like sediment in a pipe, just waiting for the right pressure to make it burst. So just imagine this. While researchers are painstakingly uncovering this complex, multi-stage, time-based attack, this is the kind of response they would often get: an automated, dismissive message from a bot. The very system that was meant to provide security was actively blinding itself to one of its biggest threats. So what's the big takeaway from all this? This isn't just about one company or one piece of software. It exposes a deep, fundamental, and flawed assumption in how we design security systems. This idea that a restored state is always a trusted state. This changes how we have to think about security for any system that has a life cycle of crashing, or sleeping, or rebooting. I mean, we live in a world of suspend, resume, crash, and recover. Our devices are constantly changing state. This research forces all of us to ask a really critical question. Are our security models built for this reality? Or are they just looking at snapshots in time, blindly trusting that whatever was safe yesterday is still going to be safe today? That, right there, is the state N+1 problem.